Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, March 31st, 2023. Steve Moore has been a supporter for real tax reform since I first met him in 1991. We're delighted that he's agreed to be on our board of advisors. Now, along with Steve Forbes, Art Laffer, and Phil Kerpen, Steve formed the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. They publish a weekly newsletter, Unleash Prosperity Hotline, that provides the truth about many of the outrageous statements coming from Washington, D.C. It's a fantastic mix of short news, commentary, and humor items compiled each day by Steve and his awesome team. It's safe to say this is the newsletter that D.C. doesn't want you to read. Now here's Steve's article. If you want to drain the swamp, increase economic growth and jobs, and ensure that the U.S. retains our status as the world's economic superpower, it's time we scrap the entire income tax monstrosity and move to the FAIRtax. Did I mention that instead of the Joe Biden scheme of adding 97,000 new IRS agents, we could effectively abolish the IRS once and for all? It's well known that one of the greatest levers of power in Washington, D.C. is the tax code. Members of Congress and lobbyists buy and sell favors all the time thanks to our more than 50,000-page incomprehensible tax code. With a simple fair tax, which abolishes the income tax, the corporate tax, the capital gains tax, the dividend tax, the payroll tax, and the dreaded death tax, there's nothing for politicians to buy and there's nothing to sell. At the center of it all is the IRS. Now, this is the agency that drives corruption and kills prosperity. And because Washington, D.C. refuses to hold them accountable, the agency's tentacles continue to grow. The IRS will soon be tracking every one of your transactions. That's your bank deposits, withdrawals, and even personal lifestyle decisions, such as what kind of car you drive, how often you go out for dinner, and where you take your vacations. Now, I don't think the fair tax is perfect. No tax system is. But one thing I love about it is that it will no longer be any of the government's business how much money you make. This ensures taxpayer privacy and keeps government out of the boardroom and out of your bedroom. That's why the only way to truly slay this Leviathan is to lop off its head. It's time to kill the IRS once and for all and implement the fair tax. The fair tax is a proposal for a consumption tax, often referred to as a national sales tax, that would replace the current federal income tax system in the United States. The fair tax is a simple, fair, and transparent tax system that would revolutionize the way the government raises revenue and the way individuals and businesses pay their taxes. The tax rate would be somewhere around 23%, but that would be the only federal tax you pay. And you pay at the cash register rather than filing returns, so now April 15th would be just a normal spring day without weeks of tax preparation. Now, under the current unfair income tax system, high-income individuals and businesses are able to take advantage of deductions, credits, and loopholes to reduce their tax liability. The fair tax, on the other hand, would be a flat tax that would apply to all purchases regardless of income level. This would ensure that everyone pays their fair share of taxes regardless of how much money they make. The fair tax is economically smart, administratively clean, and most importantly, it protects our liberties. Without the burden of the powerful IRS, corrupt IRS enforcing an income tax, it would be rocket fuel for the U.S. economy. Imagine how much we would grow and how prosperous we would become if we started taxing people on what they take out of the economy, which is what they consume, rather than what they put into the economy, which is their work, their thrift, their productivity, and their entrepreneurship. The people who would benefit the most for this plan would be lower income Americans because there would be more jobs and more opportunities. You'd see dramatic increases in living standards for Americans if we just simply taxed people on what they consume rather than what they earn. Do you want to bring down the trade deficit and become less reliant on China? Well, the fair tax imposes a legal tariff on imported goods from China. But when our companies sell things abroad, there's no U.S. tax imposed. This is a tax system that ensures that more and more products and services are made in America. I've devoted most of my career to tax reform, and the fair tax is the holy grail. In conclusion, as Steve points out, the ruling elite and their minions are desperate to keep the income payroll tax system in place. It gives them control over us, and it can be used as a giant ATM machine. Now, there's going to be a vote on the fair tax in the House of Representatives. Speaker McCarthy and the other elites didn't want it, but it was forced on him. We now have the opportunity to force all members of the House to show where they stand. They could either vote for the present income payroll tax system, or they could vote for the fair tax. They can support the corrupt income tax in the IRS, or they can vote to eliminate it. It can't be any simpler than that. They can vote to hide the true cost of their government, or pass the fair tax and show everyone the true cost of government on every retail receipt. And they can support the largest transfer of power from government to the people, the fair tax, or they can oppose it. Now, if members think the fair tax needs to be changed, then they can propose that change. Don't condemn the entire bill because it has a flaw that can be easily addressed. Please stand with us and demand that your representatives support a much fairer, a much simpler, and much more efficient way to fund the government, the fair tax. The fair tax doesn't pick winners and losers. Because it taxes spending, not earnings, the fair tax lets everyone save for their retirement tax-free. The fair tax collects the revenue the federal government needs to operate, but does so in a way that has the least adverse impact on our individual freedom and the least impact on our economic prosperity. There are no tax returns to file, no records to keep. We'll pay our federal taxes when we make retail purchases of new goods and services. And with a fair tax, there is no need for the IRS. If you sell a used couch or a used jet ski online, there's no fair tax due on that transaction. The fair tax will allow us to take back control. The income payroll tax system is broken. It's no longer working. We can't repair it, but we can replace it with the fair tax. Join us and take back control of our country and our lives, not with bullets, but with the elimination of one of the biggest threats to our liberty and economic prosperity, the income payroll tax. We should also remember Edmund Burke's warning that applies to our efforts to take back control. Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could only do a little. We should also remember this quote from George Orwell's 1984, which, if we do nothing, may very well foretell your and your children's future. If you want to picture the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. So what can each of us do? We can write letters and make calls to our elected representatives and attend Zoom town hall meetings demanding that if they really want to allow Americans to take back control, the first step is to eliminate the income payroll tax system and enact the fair tax. Take back control. Help us pass the fair tax. Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing, or actually we'll call that investing, $10.40 a month, you help provide the financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to FAIRtax.org and invest in AFFT. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.